we'll just dive straight into our third and last panel for this evening, which is on technology and its role in legal education. The panel is being moderated by Professor Dr. Saif Gangjee. He is the Professor of Intellectual Property Law at the University of Oxford and has acted in an advisory capacity for national governments, law firms, international organizations, and the European Commission on IP issues. Dr. Gangjee is a graduate of the National Law School at Oxford, where he was a Rhodes Scholar. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Mani. I'm assuming I'm audible. So you don't recognize yourself in these formal introductions. What I've mainly been over the past few months, like many other people, is a primary school teacher. But I mean, it's a great panel to be a part of, and I'm looking forward to getting going into some of the issues. Before I introduce the panelists and give you a sense of what we're going to talk a little bit about, I just want to thank the people who've helped set this up. So we've been interacting with Yash, Rupa, Savita, Jian, Akanksha, Mani, and the other people behind this. I think listening to the other two panels and sort of the panel that Sachin just concluded, it's been very, very insightful and rich, and just increasingly underlining the fact that this is a good process to begin. In terms of what our panel is about, through the prior discussions amongst the panelists, I think one of the good things to flag up is we're not breathlessly enthusiastic about technology as an overall savior or solution. There's going to be quite a measured look at what law tech can do for legal education. And a couple of themes have emerged in our preliminary discussions. One is to design legal education to meet professional needs and challenges. So professional needs are evolving, and how should the legal education side of things match up to that? Bearing in mind the caveat that is law only about being a feeder to the profession? If you take that for granted for the moment, then being more nimble and responsive to the profession and challenges. Of course, we're living through one of those challenges now, which is COVID-19. So the second theme that we're looking at picking up on in this panel is designing legal education to improve the pedagogical experience. And that's in a couple of different dimensions. One is to scale up. So talking about some of the issues the first panel was discussing, opening up numbers, Sarsu's point about distance education, which is already in place at the law school, and seeing if digital technology allows us to do this at scale. And we've got expert panelists to speak to that. And the second is to improve the quality of the pedagogical experience, the quality of learning and understanding. And I was very struck by many points made by the second panel in terms of the inclusivity and just design. So Amba's point about designing this into the systems that you're setting up, designing access, where and when people are going to be accessing materials and how they're going to be situated. We've got to think of them in sort of an integrated way. So it's not just about scale, but it's thinking about how you're going to develop the design as well. The final point to mention underpinning these themes is capacity, and that takes us back to the first panel. And Umakant and Sarsu made these points very clearly. You've got to build up the capacity to then deliver if you're going to be scaling up, and you've got to think about how you're doing it. And are you scaling up for inclusivity? Are you scaling up as a revenue stream? These take us in different directions. So we need to keep some of these things in mind. So that's the general sense of what the panel is going to be covering. I'll briefly introduce our sure-footed Sherpas in order of speaking. And we do have an expert panel. Pramod Rao opens us off, and he's really just going to provide a map of the issues in this area and draw on a lot of experience. Pramod is the Group General Counsel at ICICI Bank, but he's also closely involved with the IDIA Trust. He has a deep and long-standing interest in law tech and in regulatory reform. So he's bringing many years of thinking about these issues to the table. Up next is Ashok, and Ashok Kamath is the chairperson of the Akshara Foundation, who's won awards for exemplary work in children's education. And the foundation is engaged closely with government schools at scale and sort of focused on digitally delivering education and numeracy in particular. So Ashok has practical experience in the inclusivity and scaling up sort of side of things of education. So we're looking forward to hearing from him. We then turn to Poojitha Rao, and Poojitha is the Associate General Counsel advising the New York Presbyterian Hospital. And she has a long-standing interest in law and technology, but she's also been part of an institution reacting and pivoting and adapting to COVID, and will bring something of the need to be nimble when responding to the changes that are going to head our way and how technology can help. And Rahul Matthan, who is well known to many and a partner at Trilegal, is going to conclude the panel. And he's going to be looking at the law practice of the future and the kinds of skills that legal education should be equipping law graduates with to match up to those. So I will now turn over to Pramod. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. And of course, thank you to the Alumni Association. It's been scintillating 2 hours, and hopefully we keep you engaged as much. So very quickly, I think we are in a perfect storm. There is indeed, the COVID-19, which is a pandemic, which has swept the nation and the world. We have, as we have heard, the budgetary cuts at NLS, which NLS has experienced, and the reservation issue that is sort of being talked about. And I thought, both in terms of trying to deal with the role of technology in education, I could try and provide some insights, some perspectives on how all three could be dealt with. Just in interest of full disclosure, I had mentioned to the panel, but I think it's right to do here as well. I had been associated in the past with mylaw.net when it was part of Rainmaker. I am no longer associated with them, but I continue being associated with Rainmaker, which is now focused on the corporate sector. Several of my insights are also based on conversations that I've had with stakeholders, with students, with recent graduates, and obviously a lot of my peers. So with that said, let me just launch. So to me, there is an entire edtech revolution that is happening, which we all have to actually be aware of. I'm sure those of you who read the newspapers today would have seen that Byju's has made a $10 billion valuation. And why have they made it? I think it is because of the way that they are harnessing technology, the way they are delivering education. And I think universities will do well to be aware of how that is really transforming the nature of connect, if you will, with the consumers of such education. Just to give perspectives, they grew from in the last 3 years from a 490 crore revenue to over 2,800 just this year in the financial year gone by. And all signals tell us that in the COVID situation, people are even more signing up with them. Within the law tech space, there are 3 or 4 players. There is LawSeco, there is Loctopus, there is Enhelion, there is MyLaw. And all of these are catering at some level to what I believe are the gaps that the law university education is leaving. And I will, cover some of those as we go along. There are equally, law-focused blogs that serve, I would say, some educational purpose. There is India Cop Law blog. I think Umakant edits that. There is SCC Online blog. And there are others of varying qualities. There is equally, I would say, opportunity within all this edtech and law-tech focused players who are there. And to me, I want to weave that in with really what is it that causes them to fail, and probably draw a linkage to distance education, which equally Sarsu was speaking about. I think one, they all fail because they cannot quantify the impact in terms of learning outcomes. If there is a correlation that can be drawn, that works very, very well. They do not impart necessary skills for workplace success. And please don't take workplace as any particular definition. I think it's whichever way you choose to define workplace is the way that I believe skills should be imparted. They cannot show a correlation between actual workplace joining, a job placement, or opportunities that various sectors offer. They do not undertake frequent or necessary content refresh. There is equally a inability to keep pace with technology. And I would say that all these remarks actually hold good for distance education programs too. More often than not, they are a one-time investment into what is the curriculum, and then it is reached out and sent across. I think there needs to be a strong look at what is it that those distance education programs actually contain. Do they require a refresh? Is there a way that they can be kept updated? Is there a way, and equally which I would guess, which will challenge the NLS administration, Sudhir and Sarsu amongst them, is to say, can a professor teach not 80, but 800 or 8,000 students? Are we geared for that? Are they trained enough to be able to deliver something on those lines? Similarly, do we have ability to deliver feedback and evaluation for those that will sign up for these distance education or in mass numbers? How do you sort of deliver that? I will, just switch gears here and sort of talk about what I thought were the strengths of NLS and which I indeed am quite proud of to observe from the outside, but equally with some, sort of perspectives. There is a well-recognized, powerful brand that NLS has. It has that branding both in, I would say, the bar, the corporate circles, the law firms, and so on, but also academia. I think the very fact that students go overseas, get into admissions into overseas colleges and universities, again, is a signal of how well regarded the university is. It has had a history of being a pioneer in legal education. When 5-year programs were not the norm is when NLS sort of took birth. And again, to me, the challenge is that can it be a pioneer now? To me, the distance education programs, I've already made some remarks about it, but let me sort of ask and propose to say that what if the online course can equally be offered across the BA LLB program? What if LLMs can be offered online? And frankly, COVID may not give us a choice at all. It may be something which we have to do, regardless of whether we choose to or not. And to me, that is the exact adaptation that we can see the courts have made. The minute you see that courts have gone online, of course, their focus may be on urgent matters and they are operating at 10, 15% of their capacity. But truly, that transformation was laid because of the investment in technology that has been made over the years. And maybe at some level, to link back to both the first panel and the second, to me, there is an opportunity. The opportunity, for instance, of multilingual offering when it is online. Today, we have natural language processing. It can actually translate, as a faculty member is speaking, to the language which the student wants to hear it. Can we harness something like that? To me, equally, whether it is closed caption videos, whether it is audio, which is made available for students with diverse needs, each of that is what technology sort of offers. And to me, this is exactly where I would say a lot of investment sort of needs to happen in terms of both ability, as I said, to engage a larger audience, not just 80, but 800 or 8,000. And to me, that might also be the secret in some senses of addressing the revenue gap. That today, if you are able to address only 80, but instead it turns to 800, how does that work? Or if it is 8,000. If we have talked about where there is reservation or domiciliary reservation which Karnataka state is offering. What if the BLB program is offered in the language which actually allows more people from Karnataka to actually avail of that education that NLS imparts? To me, that is the promise really of technology, and which I would urge the university to sort of consider. From the student perspective, there will be challenges. I won't deny that. I think both connectivity and bandwidth is not uniform across the country. There is equally a loss, I would imagine, which happens in terms of transmission, in terms of how you are engaging. But a couple of feedback that I got were also encouraging. For instance, they said that, engaging on a virtual program, a virtual delivery of BLLB programs that are currently being done by law school, actually is more engaging for them because it's more audible. They are able to engage far more directly. And to me, that is exactly the sort of choices which I feel we are at that stage of. Similarly, students who are expecting internships, to me, I would say now it is the world of virtual internships. We ourselves are sort of engaged in offering that across 4 or 5 law schools. So again, whether you undertake virtual internships, whether you undertake mooting through the virtual platforms, to me, that is going to stay until we discover a vaccine for COVID. And there is no time than present to sort of reinvent. I will probably just conclude in 2 minutes, which is to bring out 2 aspects. These kind of transformations, sometimes we believe that we need capital. I really believe that what we need is innovation. And I think Sachin alluded to it, but in a way, I'll build on that. A lot of innovation has occurred in law tech. A lot of that delivery is already occurring today. To me, the question is, can a NLS tie up For instance, do you want to tie up with the Coursera, with the edX? Do you want to think of a tie-up with local players who have developed, or do you want a third person altogether who doesn't exist to come on the scene? And evaluate within those, what does it mean? There are indeed, a lot of programs which, for instance, Coursera or edX hosts a Harvard or, MIT and their programs and offered free of cost. Is that free model something which NLS wants to, undertake? Or do you want to actually tie up with somebody who will showcase you and make sure that it is NLS as a brand that is visible and which gets captured? So the example I offer is something which we did with Agami that Sachin heads at ICICI. For an ODR platform creation, we ran an open innovation challenge. And what it allowed us to do was really discover a person or a set of entrepreneurs who could deliver that platform in an independent, neutral manner. Agami went one step further. They've created an entire ODR ecosystem. To me, the challenge which I would ask a Sarsu or a Sudhir to think about is that can they sort of ride this wave of COVID, the low-tech opportunities that exist, and transform legal education for the next decade or more, right? So I'll pause here. I'm sure there are questions and comments, but let me not take up all the bandwidth. So over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Pramod. And before we hand over to Ashok, some very interesting comments sort of on the side. So Sarsu mentions that NLS is thinking of MOOCs. Murli raises an infrastructure point, but then Pramod, you've addressed that by saying that if you bring in partners who provide the platforms, then it's just content that you need to worry about. You need to sort of prioritize. Amba's also mentioned that she has experience with enabling access to persons with disabilities, which she can also assist with. So there's lots of good stuff on the chat. Let me hand over to Ashok now. Ashok, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. You can see a very strange background behind me, but that's purely because we've had no power for the last 12 hours and even the batteries have run out. So I'm banking heavily on wireless technology, talking to you from an iPad and using Reliance Geo dongle to communicate. So forgive me for the poor background. It was fascinating to listen to the speakers before talk about 80, 800 and 8,000. And I am confronted in my work at Akshara. And by the way, I'm not a lawyer. I studied at IIT Bombay and I found myself saying yes to joining this panel simply because of the work that we at Akshara have been doing on the ground. We are spread, our efforts are across close to 80,000 schools covering Karnataka, Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. And we are looking at first to fifth grade children. So it's foundational learning that we are focused on. And clearly we are in the rural area where the digital divide is as stark as it can be, right? But while there are challenges, there are significant opportunities as well. I just want to walk you through that. First of all, clear understanding that more than 65% of our children go to government schools in rural communities. That ratio is skewed when you are in urban centers because there are more what are called affordable private schools, and children, you know, where the parent has a little extra money in the pocket, the children, you know, do go to these affordable private schools. But 40 kilometers outside of Bangalore, and the number is reversed, you know, mostly, you know, children go to government schools. The issues are plenty because the children depend, for example, that we don't have to consider, I'm saying this because some of these we don't have to consider in the context of an IIT or a law school, is that children depend on the midday meal because that's the only nutrition that they would get, you know, during the day. So that has to be factored in all your solutions, right? Believe it or not, speed and scale is crucial in doing whatever you have to do. Simply because we are adding, on an average, 25 million children every year in this country to first grade. So unless and until you have the ability to scale up rapidly, you know, without compromising significantly on quality, I think we're going to fall far behind the curve that we would like to be on, right? Second is we've always thought about these things as let's get the enrollment numbers up and then we'll worry about quality. I don't think this sequential thing, makes any sense anymore. It can't be enrollment and quality. It has to be enrollment and quality at the same time. Much as, in nutrition, it's not about just giving food security and then nutrition, but it's giving both at the same time, right? Third, not enough tools. We need to create them. Not enough training. Our teachers, in this lockdown period and beyond, if you talk about online teaching, our teachers are going to be handicapped in a big way because put a camera in front of them and they won't know what to do, right? Not enough societal involvement, which is a problem that all of us are responsible for. Not enough honest assessment that happens as to how systems are performing. Inadequate implementation of appropriate technology. What's appropriate, what's technology in schools is you throw in a few computers or a smart blackboard, whiteboard, and you think that that's, the end of the game. But there is no question, there's not enough content, there's not enough training, there's no linkages to curriculum. Many of these problems which render all these investments almost useless. And clearly not enough content in local languages, right? Currently the state governments are struggling to get good content onto some digital form. Very little of it is available for free, okay? It's only players like an Akshara or many others like us who've for a long time put our content up in the Creative Commons that there's been, there is at least there's something available. But clearly an opportunity for entrepreneurs to make money now because everyone wants to go online and therefore they will not share their content without a fee, and governments will be hamstrung to move forward, right? So really, if you look at this, there's, for example, our children are handicapped because of what's called the million-word gap concept. So if you read a single book, one book a week to your child when the child is growing, then that child is ahead by 290,000 words when compared to a child to whom nobody's read a book to. And that number goes up to 1.4 million words if you've read 5 books per week on an average, right? So this gap, means that whatever solutions you come up with have to be, able to address a wide diversity of situations, right? The COVID world has, Akshara has in the past, put all of our stuff not only in the classroom form, but also in digital form. So as an example, what we teach in the classroom for 1st to 5th grade math is available as an Android app that runs on the cheapest Android, for free in 9 Indian languages. But the curriculum is taught as a set of 260 games that children can, play with. Doesn't need fancy graphics on your phone. It has been designed to work on the most entry-level phones, right? So we've consciously put this thing out even pre-COVID. Now the question that COVID has brought up is, how do you get all this to the last child? And that's really where you find that the digital divide is an amazingly large one, right? Statistics for India say that only about 31% of all mobile phones in this country are smartphones. 31% of all mobile phones. So you are talking in terms of about 350 odd million, mobile smartphones in the country. And I'm willing to bet that a large chunk of it comes from urban areas. People like you and I would probably have more than one. And that leaves roughly a 15% of the total count in rural communities. So if you bring in online learning, then all children, only 15% of the children would have access to a device that they can use for learning. So that's really the first thing. So our approach right now has been, we have looked at what assets are available around us. And you'd be surprised that there are so many things. And, there are some of these things that, you guys from the law school can take some learning from. For example, there is a large platform created by MHRD called Diksha. Now, Diksha is a platform where a lot of open source content is available, in terms of curriculum, in terms of, videos, in terms of teachers putting stuff up, in terms of assessments, and all this is up there for free usage by the states. Now, this is not the only thing that was done. The government also over the last year have created what are called energized textbooks. So if you pick up a 4th grade maths textbook, at the end of the chapter on addition, there's a QR code, and if you scan that, it takes you to the Diksha platform where there's a curated set of learning resources available. Okay, so these are called energized textbooks. And this year, I think across the country, we'll be printing more than 450 million energized textbooks, covering the school thing. Now, these are the resources and the assets that have been created on the ground. So how do you leverage this? Because remember, the digital divide is still there. So we are going to be piloting, first of all of our stuff is on Diksha and has always been. But this year we are going to be piloting an interesting concept of training the teacher to run parallel lesson plans. One, primarily because of the social distancing. If I have 20 children in my class, then I can only accommodate 10 in the classroom. The other 10 will be outside, maybe at home, and the school will issue them Android phone that is enabled for or disabled for everything except scanning and Diksha. Okay? And now the teacher has to create parallel lesson plans, one for what she's teaching in the classroom and one for what she expects the child to do in the house with the phone. So on Monday, half the class is in the classroom, half is outside. But around lunchtime, the children who are outside will come to the school for the midday meal because everyone needs the midday meal. The phones are collected, sanitized, charged, and handed over to the ones who are in the classroom today and who will be outside tomorrow. Right? So if you keep doing this, at the end of the week, you know that the whole class has got the benefit of 3 days of teacher socialization and and instruction, and 3 days of online curated content learning. We're not expecting that the child will do 4 or 5 hours of looking at the phone. We'll be happy if they do just a single hour, 1 hour, right? The question that comes to everybody's mind is, where are these phones going to come from? And I think there's an opportunity here for entrepreneurship. So if Dev is an entrepreneur in a small place, and if he can get him 5-6 lakh rupees and he buys a couple of 100 phones to service 400 children, and if the government can guarantee him a monthly lease rental of X rupees per child per month, he can actually, and I use Dev as a placeholder, but it could be a self-help group with several women who can be employed to do this and manage the whole logistics on the ground. They don't have to worry about the content. But there will be, these things that can happen, where phones come in and are made available. So I think potentially a long-term solution to remove the digital divide exists by doing something like this. Over time, we could offer parents the ability to buy a phone on, very low EMIs and stuff like that. But right now, I think our focus this year will be on showing a large pilot running with this concept so that it can be then scaled up next year. COVID is here to stay for a while. It's not 3 months or 6 months. The distancing problem is going to be with us for the next couple of years. Even today, I think WHO thinks that they'd be lucky to have 2 billion vaccines by the end of 2021. So it's a long way off. We need to, and the first set of vaccines will not definitely come to us or the children that we serve. It goes to, rightfully first, I think, health workers, and then those who can afford to pay. That might not be quite rightfully, but, so the children will get it towards the end. So I think creative use of assets with creative solutions, I think, can address removing digital divide, getting the schools open, running the curriculum. Teacher training can be done online completely. Entrepreneurship and jobs can be created. So I think there are lots of these possibilities that exist, and I'm sure there are some parallels that could be used in in law school. And around this whole thing, what is the core of this for us has been the creation of a societal platform. That effort was done by Nandan Nilekani and his team, when they founded Ek Step and created the Diksha platform, which was then, transferred to MHRD. But that concept of societal platform to be able to service, several 100 million beneficiaries, that thinking is making a big difference, right? Which is why I think I like Pramod's thinking of saying, don't worry about 80, think about 80,000, because then, you have, and always you don't design to scale what works, but you design for it to work at scale right from the beginning. Because if you do the former, then there are two learning cycles, right? So this is really the pitch. I think I've spoken way too much, but there you are.
Ashok, thank you very much. It was so enlightening that the electricity came back on.
I know.
So it's been, I think you've left us with just more admiration for the work that you've done and the work that you're going to do. So thank you for that. I think there are many points in there, but the two that really stand out are sort of thinking from the beginning of delivering at scale. So modularity and a whole bunch of other things that go with thinking at scale, we need to think from the beginning about. But also your other point was sometimes you may just need to use technology to supplement a textbook or to supplement other people's law degrees at other institutions by offering components or good content on foundational courses, for example. So you don't have to, you could deliver entire degrees or diplomas online, or you could just supplement what's already out there. And I think that's fantastic. And that might address a point raised by Alok in the chat when Alok says, but is law school in the business of scaling up? And it depends on what you're doing. If you're ordering bespoke courses or sort of specific diplomas rather than a whole degree, then you may want to do some things at scale and some things sort of small. So with that, let me turn to Poojitha, who's up next. Over to you.
Hi, thanks, Dave. Sachin, you had categorized us in the group of ancient, old, and new, and I'm like prehistoric. I graduated from law school over 27 years ago. I've been out of the country for 27 years now. I come, to India every year, but even so. So I struggled a lot about what I should say that would be relevant. I mean, there's the digital divide issue. There is how to use technology as a tool, the whole current COVID situation. Luckily for me, and thanks Vignesh, I spoke with Vignesh for an hour last night, and I wanted to understand the current state at National Law School from a student's perspective. What is happening what is the curriculum like these days? What are some of the issues that the students are facing? What kind of clubs exist? What support facilities are available? And we had a phenomenal conversation. So I want to focus on two things today. One is the issue of isolation that I bet most students experience, and perhaps faculty and admin as well, during these days of online learning. Isolation along with mental health issues, which include, the issues of procrastination, feeling, it can be, deep depression, stress to procrastination. It's a wide range of issues. And how technology can help with that, and how we as alumni can potentially help with that. And the other is to figure out how to make the curriculum a little more fun. And I realized, I mean, all of us, we went from 12th standard and second PUC, which was so very intense. We're all aiming towards getting into law school. And then we are bang into torts, contracts, constitutional law, property law, econ, sociology, and it's like terribly boring. And I think there is an opportunity to make classes exciting, not just during the elective years when you're third or fourth or fifth year students, but from the beginning. And one of the things I was thinking of was whether we can have courses that are similar to some of the electives, Vignesh, that you were telling me about, like using movies or TV shows or books as a starting point for understanding a concept. Law and Order SVU or a Hindi serial to talk about procedural laws. Why not, right? And we have this opportunity now with the potentially expanded faculty with online learning. The other thing about making curriculum fun and less stressful could be that instead of having, let's say students had 5 classes of each subject each week, and I believe that's what we are continuing to do at law school, is try and keep those number of classes. It's a huge burden on the faculty, and it's also this Zoom exhaustion. There's people, I know my kids who are 19 and 17 and a half complain most about fatigue looking at the computer. And these are kids who are used to being on their screen pretty much 24/7. And they are complaining about physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion, just looking at the screen. So one of the thoughts would be to reduce the number of actual classes and see if that the time that the faculty and the students save from attending the other classes to do some background work. If it's watching this movie and coming up to the class with a presentation, that would be one way to liven things up. The other, I was actually asking my daughter, who is now a first year, or she just finished her first year in college, what University of Michigan is doing to make classes, online classes, a little more engaging. And she said, it's a combination. Some of them are pure lecture method. You listen to the professor. Some of them you can watch, at your leisure. I mean, within a certain time frame, but you can watch it at night. It doesn't have to be during that class period. You can still be, tracked for your attendance if that's an issue. But maybe have some flexibility on when the students watch certain courses. And then have breakaway sessions, is what she was saying, for some courses, and not all of them. There are breakaway sessions where the professors tie up some students and they go and look into one issue, and 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, they come back and present to the class and whatever their group discussed. But I think that there's a lot of things we can do, not just during this COVID isolation phase, but going forward, that makes it a little more engaging, and it sort of addresses the point about different learning styles as well that many people in the second session were talking about. Always preparing for an exam or listening in for, it's tough. I mean, not just for people with attention issues, but everybody. So I have all these random thoughts. They're not like coherent like the other speakers, but I think it's important to bring these up. On the issue of mental health issues and the feeling of isolation, I was wondering what we as a community can do to try and mitigate that. I work at a hospital, a leading top 5 hospital in the country, and we are all grown-ups. There are no young adults working unless they are interns, and we still have severe issues and anxiety issues. Will we have a job tomorrow? I mean, there are frontline workers who have not even PTSD because it's not post-trauma. That's what they're experiencing right now. And one of the things our hospital did was that the CFO or the CEO every day at noon addresses, and it's through a video stream, of course, so people can log in or not. But it helps to hear the leadership every day on the state of the hospital, where are the masks coming from, how are we doing economically, what happened, and how many patients were admitted, how many died, how many left. And now, I mean, of course, things have improved, but listening to leadership was super helpful for all of us. And they're continuing to do that. So perhaps something that Professor Sudhir or guest speakers can make a short amount of time each day where people can log in and feel connected. And again, you can watch it at a later point of time, but I think being connected is very important. Well, Vignesh and I were talking about mental health issues, and I was so pleasantly, not surprised, but impressed that National Law School has 3 counselors, professional counselors who are available to students should they want to talk about their personal issues. There's a little bit of stigma involved, and now if people are back home, maybe there's some challenges in getting on, but I think it would be helpful to advertise that, maybe starting off with a group presentation and then making those facilities available. Peer groups are very important. I think it's great when students talk to students. It's wonderful when the school addresses issues and takes a stand on issues. But I think it should not be a substitute for professional help, because like someone said, it shouldn't be a burden on students when someone else is going through a mental struggle. When people can help each other out, but that shouldn't be the responsibility of 18 to 20-year-old kids, students. I think the alumni can also play a role. We were talking about fundraising and what the alumni can do. I think a big role we could play if there is interest is to be involved as and when necessary. I like the idea of a writing workshop a lot. In addition, perhaps we can have a faculty advisor for each and every student, if that's not already the case. The assigned faculty member who's not necessarily your professor, who checks in on you throughout the year, just on how you're doing academically, but also personally. So there's one checkpoint in law school, and potentially a panel of alumni who could be available to students as well as a resource. As we're not faculty, so we don't influence any decisions. So hopefully there's no stigma attached. And maybe we can pair up with students who are looking at specific interests, whether it's women, whether it's the LGBT community of the alumni, or whatever else it may be. So anyway, those are my few random thoughts. I'll let Rahul, who used to bully me when we were on conferences, he would try to make me laugh, Rahul, remember? And it was just, I couldn't not laugh every time I was in a conference with you, but now I think
completely deny that as false and fabricated.
See you.
Yeah, Poojitha, thank you very much. I think you've said something fundamentally important, because with all the focus on technology, where are the human spaces and how do you design them back in? And I want to circle back to it in the final discussion, but let's have Rahul pick up on this. Rahul, over to you.
Thanks. Thanks, Dave. It's actually great to see everyone. Poojitha, you mentioned it first, but it's been a long time. More importantly, it's really interesting to see that much of my class is watching this, and I'm struggling between the WhatsApp chat and this chat and the conversation. It's quite challenging. So thank you to the governing body of the Alumni Association for putting this together. This is really phenomenal. And thank you to Sudhir and Sarasu for sitting through all of this patiently. Dave, you asked me to talk about, and I offered to talk about the future of the legal profession. And you started out by saying that we're not all tech optimists, but I'm a huge tech optimist. I mean, I just think that as much as technology is painful, history has shown us that it's pain that once we get past, we find that we can't live without it. And we're in the middle of that pain right now when it comes to technology and the legal profession. COVID-19 has brought a lot of this into sharp focus. And so, we're seeing in litigation, we're seeing the e-courts, and we're seeing, we had a very nice discussion, Pramod was part of it some time back, where Justice Chandrachud, who's heading the e-courts program, actually made some remarkable points I never thought I'd hear a judge of the Supreme Court make. He said we've got to look at different ways of handling disputes. We've got to think of algorithms. And he said, not algorithms in terms of AI solving disputes, but algorithms looking at the vast majority of our disputes where, if you're trying to compute damages, or if you're trying to do, figure out what an insurance claim is, surely there's an algorithmic method to take the pain of 90% of that out. In the profession of law, as in, there are many aspects to it. Litigation is one. But think about research. Regardless of whether you're in a law firm or whether you're actually litigating, you have to do research. And Poojitha, when you and I, dinosaurs, were around, there was no Google. And so we had to go to the library, physically look through books, look through commentaries. And the universe that was open to us in terms of what we could find was remarkably limited. It was limited to what some people had actually quoted in a book that we were referring to. And then if we had the fortitude, which quite frankly I never did, to go through all the cases in the library, we might find some gems. But that was limited to people like Ramanand Munkur, who managed to do that kind of thing. But today we've got search. And so I'm afraid to get into a classroom today because students have the ability to know much more than I do. And we have to change the way we think about teaching, at least from the way we were taught. And unfortunately, these children, and I shouldn't call them children because, quite frankly, they're not, but the students today are in the verge of being disrupted because search is going to be disrupted by AI. And so research is going to be provided to us in a far more intelligent way than even search can do. Because artificial intelligence is going to be able to string together concepts that current semantic search will not be able to. And so if we're training our students today to search and find answers, we've got to figure out how they do AI. Drafting, another really important part of the legal practice, regardless of where you are. Today, law firms use document creation tools, various document creation tools. So all of that DPC course that we were taught when we were in law school is completely irrelevant because today 90% of the document comes to you pre-prepared. You have maybe 10% to fix, and even that is improving with AI because you're getting suggestions as to what the clauses should be. And this is not just contracts that I deal with a lot. This is also in litigation. This is also in pretty much any aspect of the document. Due diligence, that's another type of research, completely disrupted by AI. We've got companies in Bangalore that are using what they call BERT, the new innovation in natural language processing that has been adapted for legal research to actually find concepts that are difficult for others to find. And then you look at negotiation, which is supposed to be the preserve of people like us, humans, intelligent, who can actually empathetically deal with other humans. But once you standardize contracts, once you standardize decision making, if you use AI for litigation, you have a very narrow area within which humans can be human in a way that machines can't. Now, this is the world that the students in National Law School are going to enter. And if that is the world that they're going to enter, National Law School has to train them for that. So how do we do that? I think one element is, and it's been addressed in numerous panels before, one of the elements is really to train them in the technologies that they will need in the new world. And so we've got to, quite frankly, I'm not completely sure of the pedagogical methods that are being used now, but we've just got to assume that the knowledge of a particular case and what the citation of that case is, and maybe even the knowledge of a certain sequence of cases that all the textbooks say are the correct sequence to follow, that's not relevant anymore. What's relevant today is how those can be applied. And so I would really like Sudhir and Sarasu to consider much more practical education. So, if there's a technology lawyer who wants to work with me, I want to know that he or she knows technology. I don't want to know that he knows law. I want to know that he knows technology because it's the application of law to technology that is important in the future. And that is the area where humans can still prevail over machines. And this is true of energy, this is true of banking, this is true of any sector that you look at. You've got to be more practical in the way in which you impart education. You can't still be looking at the basic course material because, quite frankly, as an employer of students, it takes me 1 or 2 years to get students into the framework that they're useful in the practice of law in the way that we're doing. And the reason why I think that's really important is because if you look at all the studies on how automation is going to take over jobs, lawyers, of course, are in the 2% that are not going to be disrupted. But the important statistic is that in the people who have a 95% chance of being disrupted is legal interns and first-year law associates. And so we are going to see that, and you know, all of us have set up legal education, assuming that the law school will do a certain amount, and then after that, there will be on-the-job training, which will get people up to speed to the level that they need. Now that on-the-job training is going to be replaced by automation. And so if you want to really equip your students in a way that is meaningful to them, you've got to find a way to let them bridge that 1 or 2 years that they were getting in a law firm or in a corporate, you know, like Pramod would do, or under a senior counsel in the litigation sector, because all of those jobs are going to AI. If it's not gone already, it's going to go now. So what do we do? I think, you know, a lot has been spoken about the infrastructure challenges, and I would just flip that on its head. I'd say, is there a way in which we can use the current situation and make it a feature, not a bug, right? So if we are moving things online, and it's great to see the way the courts have moved online, we should think beyond making a digital facsimile of the offline world, because that's what we're doing when we're doing Zoom classes. Essentially, the teacher is not in the class, is in a virtual place, and the student is not in the classroom, they're in a virtual place, but they're all essentially doing exactly the same thing that they did when they were in the class. And why do we have to do that? Can we think outside of that box of the teaching that Poojitha said that her children are going through, which is, you know, you have to log on in a time, or you have to look at a particular item of teaching for a particular period of time. Why? If we can actually make teaching asynchronous, and I noticed that Sarasu mentioned this in the comments, we're thinking that NLS is thinking of MOOCs. Now, if we're thinking of MOOCs, we should think of MOOCs in a completely disruptive way. We should think about the elements that online teaching gives us. One is, it will allow us to make it asynchronous, which means if you don't have bandwidth at a particular time, you can take that course whenever you have bandwidth. And then we can fix for bandwidth to say that, okay, if you don't have 24/7 bandwidth, you will at least have bandwidth for some part of the time, during which you can download the course, or you do it offline and find a way to bring it back online. You can make evaluation dynamic, which means you don't really, and this is, you know, if you look at all the advanced education, you know, professional education that people like us who've already had an education in prehistoric times now want to get additional learning. We go and pick up these master classes and this executive education. That's completely, it can be completely asynchronous. So can we make evaluation dynamic? Because that raises the point that Pramod made, which is that we have legal education tech, but they don't have the certificate that an NLS has. And so you can't get placed out of a legal education tech. Can we take some of those examples and give it the NLS stamp, so that NLS gives you a certificate where you have had asynchronous learning, dynamically evaluated, so that you don't necessarily have to get this law degree at the end of 5 years. You can get it after 10 years if you want, but you get a law degree from NLS. Now, when you can do these two things, you can do the third extremely important thing, which is you can make teaching modular and personalized. All of us learn at a different speed. All of us learn with different interests. There is no real need for us all to go down a particular path. Could we also, you know, we've got the elective system, we've got the credit system. Is it possible to use some of those things to, you know, say that a person has actually got the education that certifies them as a lawyer capable of practicing, but do it in a mechanism which is different from this path? Is that possible? So those, I think, would be the key points that I would like to make. I just want to end with one comment, which is that we've watched industry after industry being disrupted. And there is no doubt in my mind that the legal industry is going to be disrupted. Law firms like mine are going to be disrupted. And I don't see any reason why legal education and law schools like NLS are not going to be disrupted. The only protection against disruption is to be the thing that will disrupt legal education. And NLS has an opportunity to do that. We should grasp it with both hands and become the disruption that we fear.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Rahul. So I think there's a theme running through all four panelists, Ashok, Poojitha, Rahul, Pramod, who've all said that you've got to build it. You can't do the same thing you do just online. You've got to build it from scratch, from the ground up. And Pramod mentioned NLS partnering with platforms. Rahul wanted to take that further. And maybe that's where the alumni can come in. So if you're thinking of executive education or bespoke courses, you can combine the NLS brand with the digital sort of delivery technology, bring in alumni who won't have to then travel. It can be done in a modular sort of remote fashion, and come up with these hybrid NLS plus alumni courses maybe, which would have potentially a market or add real value in other ways. You don't have to be thinking of revenue all the time. So that was fantastic. I am going to ask each of the panelists if they can quickly give us concluding thoughts in a couple of minutes. Before we do, just to pick up some of the comments in the chat. So Susan and Sudhir had a very nice exchange where it has emerged that all of the staff who carry on being in NLS at the moment have been paid sort of full salaries all the way through closure. And that's been really sort of good to see. And now if I can just ask and something on the mentorship program as well. There's been a couple of asides on the mentorship program. That might be a real space where we can think creatively of developing that further. Could I ask the panel literally if they want to in a couple of minutes in the same sequence to just give us some concluding thoughts, please?
Thanks, Dave. I think it was wonderful listening to all the panelists, and I think I just want to seize upon that word that Rahul used, disruption. I think it is upon us. It is already here. I think the question is how quickly does law school, sort of come on to that platform and start using it. And for that, I think the alumni, we are constantly, I think I remember reading a survey which called us deferred dividend. Not that I particularly thought of that, it is a correct term for us. But on the other hand, there is an entire set of alums who have been law tech pioneers, who have succeeded in various different fields. To me, the question is, can we reach out to all of them and get them involved in this journey for NLS to be transformative? Because the only foreboding that I have is that if we don't really have NLS take that stride, I have a feeling someone else will. And to me, whoever else does that will redefine, legal education for the next decade or more. And that, I think, would be a lost opportunity.
Yeah, I think this has been an amazing conversation. Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream." He did not say, "I have a nightmare." Right? So I think with the half-life of knowledge reducing, whatever we create, we have to dream about creating things where the opportunity is there for lifelong learning. The ability to impart lifelong learning on every single individual, I think, becomes essential. Because simply that, I think Rahul also made the point that AI is going to disrupt many things. You don't need to memorize facts because they're all available on Google. It's about applying all that knowledge together. So I think we should, I think everyone should think about and say, the dream of, making this available to all should be the goal.
Is that me? Okay, can you hear me? Okay, great. I just wanted to elaborate on that point about making courses fun, and this was not meant to insinuate that National Law School does not already offer courses that are creative. I mean, I saw a bunch of comments about, including Murli's and Akanksha's talking about how movies have been used, and that's phenomenal, and I think we should continue to do that where possible. But more importantly, I think, and what I forgot to mention earlier on is that because it's a 5-year course, one of the disadvantages of that for law students is that we're missing out on the joy of being a college student, where you take a course for the sake of taking a course and have no connection with what you want to end up being. And I think it would be great if we can offer a couple of half-credit courses in the first couple of years that have nothing to do with, at least nothing directly to do with law, the practice of law. Yes, we are a law school and we have to train our students ultimately to be some sort of a professional, or at least equip them with the tools, but I think it's equally important to have that joy of learning, which as an 18-year-old student, you've not had as in school, and you probably won't in law school. So if we can offer some courses, and even perhaps invite the students to have a wish list of, what they would like to learn that has nothing to do with the core curriculum, and see if, at least in this stage of a phase of online learning and a bigger network of possible resources for teaching, we could provide some exciting courses.
I don't know, Dave. I thought I made concluding remarks in that whole speech that I made, but just to pick up something that I think both Poojitha, Pramod, and Ashok mentioned, which is this concept of lifelong learning. And unfortunately, we are in a profession where, you like it or not, it's lifelong learning. There's no way we can put the pen down on continuing to learn in this area. And so, I don't know the extent to which we can, as alumni, participate more actively. I know the COVID situation allows us all to teach from the comfort of our homes without making the schlep to law school, which is easy for me, given that I'm in Bangalore, much harder for people elsewhere. But it's really important for us to be able to do that. And then, Poojitha, maybe we can pick up some of these more niche areas. I'd love to teach technology and law from a science fiction perspective, because quite frankly, if you're looking at science fiction, that is exactly where all this technology is going to go. It would be a beautiful way to teach the course. So yeah, I would, as far as I'm concerned, that would be learning for me. Actually putting the program together would be tremendous learning for me, and I would count that as part of my lifelong learning contribution to myself. Yeah, that's I guess the last thing I have to say.
Thank you. I'm going to end by avoiding the Skynet artificial intelligence Terminator reference on the science fiction note. I'm going to thank my panel for being an absolutely brilliant and insightful panel. And I want to join Poojitha in thanking Vignesh of the SBA, who's fantastically helpful to us in helping us sort of set our thinking. Thank you very much. So Mani, at this point, somebody rescues us.
Yeah, that would be me. Thank you so much, Dave. Before Savita delivers the vote of thanks on behalf of the governing board, I invite Dr. Krishnaswamy or Sarsu ma'am, or both, to reflect on the discussions today. Thank you.
So in which order do we do this?
That's entirely up to you, sir.
Sarsu, you want to go first?
I think, I don't want to say anything much. I don't want to attempt to summarize all the ideas that have come up today. But I've been making notes, and I know that Sudhir is too. And we hope that, at least some of these ideas we can take forward with the alumni's help. It makes me really happy to see that the Alumni Association is bursting forth with new energy and driving, in so many new directions. And I hope this will be the first of many webinars and first of many ways in which we can engage with alumni. So to everyone who organized this, a very big thank you from all of us here.
Thanks, Sarsu. So let me join Sarsu first in thanking the Alumni Association for taking the initiative, curating the speakers, and putting this together. I think, as I said at the start, that this is at a critical inflection point for the university. Just picking up on some of the themes that were discussed in the last panel, NLS was a disruptor par excellence in 1989. We came into the legal education world. We had a different program. It was untested. We were relatively brash and iconoclastic. We pulled it off. Not everyone believed that it would work. It's worked really well. And here we are 32 years later. We have a reputation, at least bolstered by conventional metrics of that reputation. Today, the India Today released its rankings for the best law schools, and we topped that ranking, one among, I think, 5 on the last count for 2020. So we are not similarly placed to 1989, where the #1 law school. We need to nurture that reputation, take it for what it is, and build on it. And I don't think we can lose our disruptive gene. And I'm happy to listen to what the last panel had to say. technology, that kind of technology initiative is already underway. And frankly, more substantively than has happened for some time in NLS. But it takes a lot of time, effort, and resources to build this carefully. And we must do it without causing harm to our reputation and still having an edgy and innovative quality to it. But I want to close on a different note. I don't want to go into a laundry list of stuff that's going on and or at an early stage of inception. Let me just say a couple of things. I think that good institutions, great institutions, thrive when they manage to weave together both personal narratives and institutional stories. Right? It's one thing for all of us here and to sketch a future of an institution in grand or general terms, but what it really takes is a lot of individuals who are willing to put together. And I know that all of you here who have sat through, and I see 87 participants on the Zoom at 8 o'clock plus India time. You've sat through and put in that effort and listened, and so have we. But it's going to take a lot more than just listening to each other and learning from each other. It's going to take a lot of effort that individuals will have to put in from your already busy lives, right? So I think that our role, and I speak for Sarsu and myself here, and NLS's role is to try and create the most hospitable environment where we can weave these individual stories and the institutional story together. So we are open to engaging in substantive ways. We will call on many of you and leave open spaces where many of you can engage in many of the ways discussed and in some ways that were not discussed today. So let's sustain that goodwill and that enthusiasm and motivate ourselves to put in the kind of hard work that it will take to see this university sustain this kind of success over the next 3 decades. Let me stop there. Back to you, Mani.
It's actually over to Savita now.
Savita,
no problem, sir.
Savita in San Francisco.
Hi, Sudhir. Hi, everybody. It has been 3 awesome hours. I think a lot of discussion points have come out there. This is just a start for the Alumni Association's general governing body to put together for all of you. But what we look forward to is what Sudhir is also echoing. It is essentially time as well as not only our talent, but also the treasures. So I hope we can all come together and make a more far-reaching contribution to the growth of this institution that has given us all a lot. I'd like to thank all the panelists. Some amazing discussion that has taken place here. The moderators did an excellent job. We also have some student body people who have essentially student body students who have essentially given their time to put forward and put together a report based upon the discussion. So help us to do that. So Mudga, Mohapatra, Mrinalini, Avantika, Prince Chandok, Vidushi, thank you so much for giving your time. I'd also like to introduce to you the governing body, because this is the first time that we are connecting. So please allow me to introduce to you Ramanand, Akanksha, Bharat Jairaj, Dinesh Singh, Jian Johnson, Mani, Rupa, as well as Dinesh Singh, Yash Asher, who have put together this amazing symposium for you. Thank you all. We look forward to engaging with you. We look forward to your contributions, as well as look forward towards more volunteerism from you as we try to take NLS to the next stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you.